All right, and welcome back to the Yonia Health Tech Podcast, everyone. We have our guest here, Josh. Josh, could you tell our listeners here a little bit about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me here, Brett. So I'm Josh Dorfman. I am the co-founder, CEO, host of Supercool, which is a media company that is really trying to do something to demonstrate how climate innovation is working in the market today. So while we live in this moment of despair, doom and gloom, we feel like a kind of hope is lost when it comes to climate. Well, what I actually see is something very different based on my experience as a climate tech founder, building startups in the climate innovation space for a long time. This is a moment where it's actually never been a better time to put a climate solution in market and try and scale a company, where we see so much innovation happening in whether it's in mobility or in buildings or in what's called the circular economy, like the next level of reduce, reuse, recycle, kind of taken to a place that's never happened before. We run a platform to not just tell those stories, but profile those companies, the playbooks they run, so others can learn from it too. That's primarily what I do. I'm also the co-founder and currently an advisor to a company called Planted. I was the founding CEO, left last year. Planted makes carbon negative building materials out of grass instead of trees to replace lumber, starting in home building. And we have a contract currently for 10 million of these 4-foot by 8-foot panels that you nail to the 2x4s when you're building a house. So we have a contract from D.R. Horton, largest home builder in the country, to really take this mainstream. And that's generally the kind of work I do.
Wow. All right. Well, for our listeners too, who may not have really had the journey here, what really, I guess, kind of motivated you to kind of see what was so in the world, right? Regardless of what it was, and wanting to get in and I guess regardless of whichever way it was for you, kind of get your feet wet as even a startup or your first startup or even your first venture, even if it was, say, even at the neighborhood level. I guess we'll start at community, because some people start with even shoveling driveways or raking leaves, or even it could that. I mean, and I'm not going to discount any of those moments, because I think those can all serve as kind of monumental moments for some people. So look, if it's not there in that way, then it's not there in that way. But yeah, I just didn't know if there was something there to help those people, because I think the reason why I'm taking this stand here is I want to first of all acknowledge all service people, but at the same time too, service people are, and people have all, I think throughout all time, this is my only time, this is my theory here, are really kind of looking to find that purpose in life, and to see beyond what it is maybe they're already doing in their life, how they can kind of apply that kind of even at maybe even the startup level, or contractor level, or even part-time or whatever it may be level, to kind of ease into it. Because I think in today's world, it's kind of an easing in. I have to acknowledge, even for myself, whoever's probably following my journey, if they are, that like mine was an ease in too. Like, I'm grateful to be able to have a job coming up here next month, and be fully remote, but I was, a nurse working at the bedside, but at the same time too, asking myself back when I was raking leaves and mowing lawns, I said to myself, I want to be my own boss too. I want to be able to see what that kind of looks like, pros and cons. So I didn't know if there was that kind of moment that was kind of there for you.
Well, I would say, just in light of how you're describing it, Brett, there's probably a whole bunch of moments, but what...
I was going to say there are for me too, yeah, but yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, and a journey, right? So that's why I think there's like these moments that kind of stack on top of each other. But for me to get to what I just described to you for the work I do today, I have to go back 30 years to when I was a fresh-faced university graduate and decided to move to China in 1995, thinking about maybe a career with the CIA, maybe the State Department. I just thought, man, if I go to China, cool stuff's going to happen. I don't know exactly what's going to be, but if I can find a way to get there. And so I managed to get a job teaching English on a university in a city called Nanjing, which at the time was a city of 5 million people, which is a medium-sized city in Nanjing. It's a big-sized city in most places, other places around the world. And it was amazing. I absolutely loved that experience. I got a part-time job while I was there working in a bicycle lock factory. So this is China 30 years ago, very much a developing country, very much like, imagine like, a lot of bicycles, a billion people riding bicycles, a lot of dirt roads, a lot of, real, like, what's considered third world, developing world. I mean, that's what China was. So I got a job in a bicycle lock factory, make a little bit of extra cash, and try and learn a little bit more about the country, the culture, see some different sides of it. Again, thinking like, okay, the CIA is going to show up and come recruit me, or,
Yeah, or they'll need a bike. They'll need a specialty bike.
They need a bike,
yeah.
Yeah. something cool is going to happen. Who knows? And I ended up going to work for Kryptonite full time. We opened more factories, and I was having this incredible experience. I mean, became fluent in Mandarin, became very interested in business. And we opened a factory in southern China. This, I want to say, was probably either the end of 1996, 1997. I'm traveling with the owner of the factory who we're partnering with, so a Chinese guy we're partnering with. And we get to this restaurant where we're going to celebrate this business relationship. And we're in his Mercedes, which was already unusual because this is like a communist country, right? Like in a developing country. We're in his giant Mercedes. And we get to the parking lot, and every car is a Mercedes. Now, this is southern China. There's a lot of money coming in from Hong Kong, which was certainly far more advanced, right? And he says to me before we go into the restaurant, he's like, Josh, look, my Mercedes is the biggest Mercedes in the parking lot. His chest swells up with pride. And in that moment, I'm thinking like, oh my God, okay, here I am in this communist country, but you're just like us. You want more, bigger, just the American dream, which we were exporting. We wanted everybody to actually be like us. At least we did back then before they kind of caught up, and now we're like, ooh, not so fast. But at the time we did. The other thing I realized was like, okay, there's 1 billion people riding bikes here, but I have a feeling like this guy, they all want cars. And now I'm seeing highways, tunnels, bridges coming in so fast as China was developing. And in that moment I thought, I don't know anything about climate change or global warming, but what does it mean when there's 1 billion cars in China, right? Like there's 4 times more people in China than America. What is that going to mean when they all catch up? And then India, and then Eastern Europe, and the whole world developing. And that really set me on a path. So that was like the moment where I thought, I'm seeing the future. I don't know what to do with that yet, but I can't shake the gift I've been given to know that the ability for everyone to raise their standard of living and for Americans to keep raising their standard of living and do that on a finite planet, that will be a huge challenge in the 21st century. And that's really what's driven all of my actions, probably most of my actions for the last 20 plus years.
Wow. Yeah. And I appreciate you looking too, and like you said, there are many different moments, but the one that has really stuck out and made a true difference. And I mean, I don't know if that was really kind of your real first taste to it, kind of the community level of seeing kind of firsthand. And I don't know what it was like to, work with bikes and then go out and just right after your shift see a bunch of bikes everywhere, and you're just, like, I'm just trying to contemplate that, like even be probably similar for someone automotive, or whatnot, or someone seeing. I mean, I have times even though I was a nurse, we're all seeing an ambulance, and I'm like, oh hey, deer to headlights. I'm like, hey, like so. And we have these automatic mechanics. I guess could be for some people would be maybe one way of phrasing it. But then there's what is so around that. I didn't know. Let's see here. For our listeners as well, if they are venturing into that, was there something that kind of served at a point where you're just like, I'm going to work in a bike factory, like, and it'll occur for everybody else. I just didn't know if for all the options you may have had at that time and whatnot, that could have been, I mean, or even contract possibilities, because that was different at that time too. Again, you're in a different part of the world, so I have to imagine this too. And is that what brought you there? Did you like apply here and then end up there, or how did that look? Yeah.
Yes, I applied here. I got into there was maybe like 2 teaching programs at the time that could actually help place you there. One was at Western Washington University, so I applied and got in, went to Bellingham for a summer, got trained on teaching English as a second language, and then got contracted to go to the Nanjing University of Science and Technology. And I think for me, what's led my journey, if there's anything, if any people are thinking, okay, what could be my next move? What could, as you're saying, Brett, like, could I go out on my own? Could I try? For me, it's always when I'm approaching things with the most enthusiasm, the most open-mindedness. I wasn't like, oh man, I want to work in a bicycle lock factory someday. I'm not sure who does. I'm not sure who has that dream. That wasn't my dream. I mean, but my desire was to learn. Right, and that was the opportunity that it presented itself, and so I was like, yeah, I'm going to go for that. I'm going to get this basically part-time job learning quality control in a bike lock factory in China, because that also sounds so insane and like crazy to say out loud that it was really exciting to me just to like go do,
Yeah.
And I think that's that's a huge driver, just that enthusiasm of like, why not? Why not go learn that new thing? If it's nuts, just try it, see what might happen. And I definitely, like you're pointing out, I think early on, just even like the idea of like, I'm going to go to China. No matter what I thought my end goals might be, it was definitely, I had that thing inside me where I wanted to carve my own path for sure. When I ultimately started my first company, which was in 2004, it was called Vivavi, like Viva V, or Live Life. And I had this idea like, okay, here I am, I'm back in the States where this consumer culture, consumption drives like 60 to 70% of our overall economy. I have this concern and now these values about the environment that I didn't have growing up, but they're so strong in me. What can I do? And I thought, I'm going to try and help consumers make better, more sustainable choices in their consumption. But the way I'm going to do that is by starting a retail company that goes and finds the most stylish, best designed, modern products I can find, which ended up being furniture and home furnishings, made of eco-friendly materials, so that people are just buying what they want, what they're attracted to, what's beautiful, and all the environmental kind of goodness, the values, are just integrated, right? It's recycled materials, it's responsibly harvested wood. All of that's just in a beautiful form, which people want to put in their home. And it took me a while to get there. And when I say it now, it sounds so simple, but at the time when I came home from China, like that gap between like, oh my God, I'm seeing the future, there's going to be a billion cars, to like, oh, I'm going to help consumers like just consume like more stylish green stuff, was all this pain of me going through this like awakening of like, holy cow, I can't believe we're on this collision course with a finite planet. How is this going to work? To like, why are our leaders asleep at the wheel? Why isn't America doing anything about this? Why doesn't anybody care? Why am I going into Manhattan with my mom when I got home? She's like, come on, I'll take you out to dinner and we'll go to a play or something. And I'm like, supposed to do this nice thing with my mom to reconnect. And I'm looking at all these skyscrapers with all the lights on at 8:30 at night. And I'm like, why are all the lights on in these empty buildings? And my mom's like, oh boy, my son, I think we might need to get some therapy for you. I was just out of my mind. I was nuts. And so it was a bunch of moments, was what I said in the beginning, to get from where I was in China to really trying to take harness that energy, that angst, that fear, that frustration, and put it into something that could be productive and proactive and positive, and let me feel like I'm making a contribution in a way that also eased a lot of that angst within me, to still fit into society and feel like I could feel good about myself and my values, and then trying to move people toward what I thought is valuable in a way that was positive.
Wow. And then being able to see it through like a whole, just what I'm getting from you too is this lens not only of your impact yourself at like relationship then also still, but you existing as self at community, right? And then going on even to the organization, institution, like you said, your first business, right? Even then, right? And then society and the world, and the impacts that kind of see as to what is so, and good, bad, or indifferent, what is so is what is so, and if you can at least declare it and get it out there, have those conversations. It's amazing how many common issues I think we all kind of have, and we can see. Because it's amazing for me sometimes too, and still do my research. Again, I went to school for nursing, but there are still some like sustainable resource. That's a big word that kind of comes up. It can be the word sustainable or sustainability, right? And that's kind of more, I think, cross-industry to kind of look at too. Again, still discovering all of this, right? But to see that some of these resources that we have that are renewable or that we can use, and pros and cons to them, I think we should still be able to distinct for them, can really have an impact, and some may even outlast normal consumer life of most products. And that may not be a popular opinion too, but at the same time too, there's the long term of using the resource too, and its impact in the long term too, regardless of what it may be, whether a product, whether a service. So, and I think that these kind of conversations, like you had said too, all lead down to that consumer making that decision. And I really want to acknowledge you for that, because I think that's the other thing that Fortune 500 companies, whether even small, medium, or large businesses and nonprofits, are up against, are consumers really having this lens to be able to see things as what is so in their own way. Whether people want to say they're misinformed or they're informed, they're going to have their decision in the end, and to be able to see that. And some are looking more at the impact. And it's amazing in the industries that maybe have been sustainable since, say, 1930, or maybe even for thousands of years now, that are having somewhat of a disruption around this. And it's amazing, too, we ought to look sometimes, and again, do your own research, everybody, some of these same resources and methods that we're trying to I would say we're almost re-adopting them. in their own kind of a way, because it did seem to work. Again, there's still what's working and what's not working, I think, and whatever it is we may present here in this thing called the human experience, right, or life, right? I think we have to share, if I have to call it something, Josh, and I think it's still, even then, it isn't giving it its light. But to see that the overall, how many people, I kind of break down, you mentioned America and United States, and I think throughout the world, it can be this, I like to bring up the image so far of a pothole. And it's amazing to see, and do your own research, that a lot of those are caused by heavy vehicles that are transporting these materials that we speak of, whether eco-friendly, non-eco-friendly, regardless. And I think even there to look, where do the ends and the means really kind of have their beginning, their middle, and their end for, say, product placement, any of those. I think, and again, who are the ones that are kind of, at this time, I want to say this too, who knows, we'll be able to go 20, 30 years back, no, but at this time, services being provided predominantly by humans, and to see that the overall experience of that and distinctions in different parts of the world. I mean, I can only imagine what it was still like in an automated lifestyle, still in the time when you were president over, still helping out with bicycles. I'm still sure that in other countries, they were still looking at life differently and and still seeing that still common area that I think we all kind of share, regardless of the regime or whichever leadership may have been there at that time. I still think there was the human experience, and last I checked, there's usually less political leaders than there are overall people or community. Again, I'm not here to, be a threat or raise any kind of violence. If anything, non-violently, I think people should be able to talk about these things and be able to have instances to do that in today's world, and using, say, technology in that kind of a way too. I want to acknowledge here too, I mean, I was present, just what is so in technology on the end of being able to have conversations like this. I was present on one of the social media platforms, and I was in a room with over, I think, 40,000 people, all listening to two individuals in the current administration, and one that was and was not in some way, shape, or form. And it was just amazing to see technology being used in that way for election purposes. And I can only imagine in other areas, even having conversations like what it is you and I are having now, to really kind of get that popular vote as to what is so. I mean, don't get me wrong, people can, freeze on camera and try to, appear as if they're there and present, and whatnot. And in today's world, it may be over-scrutinized to the point where somebody's trying to make a point as to, hey, maybe I'm being over-scrutinized in this digital environment. Be able to still have the freedom for expression around that and in their own way. So, yeah, there's a lot to digest there. And at the same time, too, I think there's a lot of relatability, too. And I was wondering, rating on relatability, after you kind of came back, and I'm going to say it's culture shock. Those are my words, not yours. But you kind of had this mindset change, and maybe it was mild. We have mild, moderate, severe for stuff with the body, and the mind. So I want to just acknowledge it that way. But to see that reintegration, and to see that, I think you had mentioned it with whether it was family or some other relationship that you had, and the impact of that. Since that time, and now looking at what's going on in China and what's going on kind of here in the United States. What are your thoughts, even, and it could be whether it's with your company or just on a personal level, whichever one you want to share, or both, if it's the same, as to where we're going, what's the overall end point for humanity, if we have to put it, because I know there's even military generals that for the longest time haven't been able to know the answer to that question, and if you don't know it, it's okay, there may not be an answer yet, but like, where are we as humans kind of all going with what it is that you're kind of predominantly bringing into the realm of the human experience? And I mean, it's great to be able to want to break down the day-to-day objects that people use. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I also drive for food delivery at this time, and I've seen some sofas on the side of curbs. So, like, there's something going on there, too, and that's just one piece of furniture. I don't know what other potential other furniture that you may handle, too, or equipment, for that matter. So, but yeah, what's kind of there for you around that, or any of that?
Yeah, I think it's one of the ultimate questions, right? Where are we going? And what I see, which I think is very, very interesting, and what excites me, is that, of course, we're in this moment around AI, right? And AI is soaking up so much of the certainly the investment dollars and the it's like market share and mind share, right? We're all talking about AI all the time. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it going to take our job? Is it going to overtake us? Is it going to ruin us? Is it going to make life better? Are we going to reach some sci-fi future, right? But
and then there's the people. Hold on, you're up to something. I don't mean to interject. And then there's other ones that are like, well, it's been in the background and it has a new coat of paint on it. It's still there. So yeah, keep going. But yeah, I don't want to stop you there.
Right,
yeah.
Right, exactly. But if you project that out, what's so interesting to me is JP Morgan came out a few weeks ago with a report that said over the next 5 years, between now and 2030, roughly $5 trillion are going to be invested in AI infrastructure. And that is an unfathomable sum of money. At the same time, if you look at how much money is being invested globally in clean energy, so solar, EVs, batteries, wind, geothermal, all of those types of technologies, last year it was already $2 trillion a year. This year it's going to be $2.2 trillion a year. This is from the International Energy Agency, so that's monitoring this globally. You project that over the next 5 years, it will be at least $10 trillion. So twice as much money is going globally into clean energy investment as is flowing into AI. The biggest driver of the global economy today is clean energy, which is something that is almost impossible for us to understand. Solar is the cheapest form of energy on the planet and in the history of the modern age. In most places around the world, including many places in the US, it is the fastest energy to deploy and the cheapest energy to deploy. And of course that means you're getting to a clean energy source and you're becoming less reliant on fossil fuels. So when I look at the future, I don't know what the future portends, but the only way that we actually get, if we want, and maybe we have no choice, into the sci-fi future, the only way we actually get off of planet Earth, assuming we want to actually go explore the universe and fulfill some of that, I think, human nature to expand our consciousness and our understanding of the unknown, is certainly probably the engine of AI, but with the cheapest form of power that has ever existed that can actually propel humanity, to be able to go expand and do things that we maybe have never even considered. I mean, if you imagine, just think about this. It's hard to imagine this, but over the 5 decades since solar has started to become commercialized, right? Solar power. The price of solar panels and the price of solar energy has dropped by 99% in 5 decades. Every time you double the production of solar globally, you can predict how much the cost of solar panels are going to drop. When you project that out one more decade, you get solar energy to a cost that is almost trivial, almost incidental. It will cost barely more than the materials itself to make it. And imagine what that means for desalinizing the ocean with huge desalinizing plants in places that don't have access to fresh water. I mean, the implications are unbelievable. Now, to say what's going to happen, is that a future, do we get to an abundant, prosperous future? I sure hope so. That's clean and enables us to sustain for generations into the future. Well, I sure hope so. But that's the piece that is the greatest piece that's the most actually unpredictable today is what will humans do with the technologies, which has always been the most unpredictable thing. You can pretty well predict that the technologies are going to reach a point where wonderful things could happen, and I sure hope they do. That is the unknown, right? What will the humans at the wheel or the, behind the autonomous vehicle, sitting in the back of the autonomous vehicle, what future will we be driving toward? That's always the hardest part to predict.
Yeah, no, and thanks for taking a look at it, because it is a complex answer, because there are and to see too, at least in I would say your neck of the woods, that you can kind of relate in that, because if we can't, I think, relate, and this is something I think I was telling David too in another discussion, and it's one of the things I want to take for anybody looking at wanting to be a host on it, because I know we've had potential other potentialities of other hosts, but I want to say this too is. And I'm just going to take it as a stand. I think any professional that really can't come down to that level of relatability and being able to express what's kind of going on it's an area that's not working within their own professionality, whether they're considered professional or not, whatever level. I want to say that too, because there's been declarations on nurses and whatnot at this time. But I just want to say I still think it's a part of intelligence, if I have to say anything else besides that, of still being able to have that in some. And I guess it's the area of being able to go into super complex, and some may call it interplanetary thought as well, but still being able to come back to ground center, or baseline at least, so then people can kind of just go, oh, like I got that, and then you kind of go from there, And I think being able to have that is a skill in and of itself too. And through where it is that we're talking about this, I think AI is in its way kind of venturing towards that, and technology. Since you mentioned AI, I'll talk a little bit about AI. Kind of venturing towards that, because I think it is able to do that better than most humans at this time. it may not be at the level or intellect. I think the age they're saying so far of that is like it's like a toddler at this time, but still, like there's still common tasks people can ask. I mean, and get somewhat answers to. And don't get me wrong, there's somebody mentioned it on one of the past podcasts too. You ask it the same question 2 different times, you may get 2 different answers. You know, you may not get the same. So, and that's just one part of using technology, right? I think there's still what's working and what's not working, you know, and still what it is that maybe has been working for however long, whether it's been through sustainability. And it's amazing too, the rediscoveries. I think there's I'm getting kind of geeky here. So there's a form of mycelium that's been found to actually be able to eat plastic. Now, mycelium has been around for thousands of years. So, like, it's just, again, there's this rediscovery or maybe even a finer look, you know, and that's just at the biological level, you know, and being able to use this. In humans, we have this relationship with biology. If anything, I think we're more following in its footsteps than it's following in ours, you know, and to be able to see, too, you know, the conversations that may be had, whether in their specific plants at B, in whatever way, shape, or form of the biological biome or identification, and what it is their uses can be or not, you know, and to see that kind of a conversation. And when people, you know, in your day to day, when people are working their 9 to 5, do they have that kind of as a conversation? No. But when they go to the market, when they're trying to make a decision now, and look, I mean, even whether it's to deliver, you know, if you can get something delivered, I mean, I've been on the internet. People can order a toilet to Home Depot, you know, from Home Depot to their doorstep. So, and the delivery driver can also say no when it doesn't fit in their car. So I'm not going to say who that delivery driver was, but at the same time too, we're at this area where consumers can kind of, I don't know, weight may not be the issue, you know, or being able to have someone with a pickup may not be able to have the issue. It may be these other things that exist in their decision. So let me think here. So we talked about community, society. Let's talk about society, right? The impacts around society. What does this, whether having this conversation have, some people have the oogie boogies or whatever we want to call it around being able to have this too as a data-informed decision, you know, or a decision when making a decision around whether they want a piece of furniture or they want a product, you know, or whatnot. And to see too that now with that there can be other, you know, variables that can come up, whether it's cost, I mean, there may be an increase in cost around this, and in the long term though it's this and that. I just didn't know, would you say the process, is it at ease for the consumer at this time? Where it is you're up to, and I guess more around the industries that you're disrupting. Would you say it's consumer friendly? You know, is it really, because don't get me wrong, I think the purpose of some products are, when they're created nowadays, are just to make the overall profit versus the overall what it's supposed to do and the durability and sustainability too. I think in its process, don't get me wrong, I've gone into a health food store and seen the bar of soap that says this was processed using wind energy or whatnot. And I think we're looking at other kind of products now. I think we've easily through human, I mean, again, I was born in 93, so I just got to say, you know, when you were in China, it was a total different time. But at the same time too, we're looking at other products we may use in the day-to-day or throughout our lifetimes, or ones that we would even want to pass along if people do in whatever way that may be, and to make that decision, you know, at that time. So I just didn't know. Yeah, and that was, again, a big, complex question there. If there's anything around any of those that you have that's kind of there that jumped out, yeah, what's there? Yeah.
I think that's it's a really important question. And so that first company I mentioned, I started that 2 decades ago. While starting that company, and actually because I had started that company, it was a product company focusing on eco-friendly products. I ended up creating a media brand called The Lazy Environmentalist. So the idea was, okay, how do I expand this into a bigger conversation about how could all these, I think, Americans who, and I'm certainly one of them, who, all things being equal, would like to be more environmentally friendly in their lives and lifestyles, but we would need convenience. We're Americans. We want it fast. We want it now. Plus, we have so many other priorities. We've got bills to pay. We've got families. We've got jobs. We've got all these other things clamoring for our attention.
With other decisions.
With other decisions, right?
Yeah.
So it's very hard to always prioritize the thing, even when it's your values and you want to do right by the planet. So I created this conversation called The Lazy Environmentalist, which ultimately became this SiriusXM radio show and Sundance Channel reality TV show. It was a wild ride. I mean, it was crazy. And so I really looked at this question from multiple angles that you're describing. 2 decades later, I think about it, and is it, where do things stand for the consumer? Well, consumers are, there hasn't really been an evolution in consumer behavior. I mean, we're clearly not living in a green consumer culture. The solutions, I think, continue to improve. And I think there's so much out there that's like fascinating and And I do believe we're at a moment which today is not so much like, oh my God, will we solve climate change? Can we do this? Can we go green in our lives? I actually think that's just actually about to happen in a much more earnest way than it's ever happened before. I think you start to see it with, even with electric vehicles, which are now at like 8 to 10% market share in America. I mean, what's about to happen with the price of batteries and driving range and accessibility to EV chargers, all that's going to get built, and EVs are just, they're way more fun to drive. They cost less to maintain. Like, that will win in my view. But you start to see the same thing with like stoves. I just talked to this company called Copper, and they make an induction range stove. Now, a lot of top chefs prefer today to cook on induction than they do even with natural gas. It's like a better, more consistent, whatever. I'm not a chef, but this is a trend that continues to emerge. So the challenge is, if you in your home want to get an induction range, most likely what will happen once you buy it is you then have to call an electrician to be like, oh, hey, can you run a 220 volt amp like plug to my kitchen? Apparently that's what I need. And the electrician's like, give me 6 months, I'm pretty busy, and that's probably going to cost you somewhere between $5,000 to $10,000. And you're like, wait. I just bought this thing, and you're telling me I got to pay like 2 to 3 times more just to like run the energy? So companies like Copper have actually put a battery inside the stove. And so what that means is you can plug that induction range into the same outlet as your coffee maker or your Cuisinart or your juice blender. And that battery will charge during the day or the intervals where you're not cooking, so that when you're ready to cook, there's enough power to actually enable you to cook without having to do all that electrical rewiring stuff, right? Now you're going to, and it looks cool, right? So you're going to get this better designed, better cooking experience without all of the costly upgrades that you used to have to do if you wanted to go electric. Now I bring that up because when we think about solving climate change today, it can seem so complicated. How can we possibly do this crazy thing, solve climate? But the way to think about it is, in its most basic form, is we need to get rid of fossil fuels, right? So we need to have all of this power generation, whether it's wind or solar or geothermal. Some people like nuclear, but we got to get all that stuff onto the power grid or on our roofs to get rid of the fossil fuels. And then, because we're going to have all of this clean power on the power grid coming to our homes and our buildings, we need to plug everything into that grid. So not have like a propane tank at home, right? Like everything needs to plug into the grid. So if you can plug into the grid and the grid is clean, you've gone a long way toward getting rid of fossil fuels, and now you've gone a long way towards solving climate. The good news is, so many of these consumer products that are coming to market today enable that, and they're like the best choices, kind of like this Copper thing I mentioned. And so I'm positive. I feel I'm upbeat about that. The other thing I would say is that you mentioned a grocery store. There are companies today, there's a company, for example, I spoke to recently on our podcast on Supercool called Wasteless. And what Wasteless does is they're looking at the problem of all this food waste in grocery stores. Right? You have all these expiration dates and all this fresh food. The expiration date is approaching, and the day before, maybe 2 days before, the grocery store manager slashes prices by like 50%, 80%, tries to get that thing out the door. Okay. It rarely happens. Some of it sells, but most of it doesn't. And if it sells, the grocery store is losing a lot of money on that sale. So, right, it's a terrible situation, and food waste is a huge, huge issue. If food waste were a country, I think it's something like it would have as much emissions as like right behind America and China would be like the country of food waste. It's crazy. And so what Wasteless does is they go into grocery stores and they will say to the manager or the team, look, we have a seamless way to actually just to alter the pricing of your yogurt, of your meat, whatever, your bananas, whatever. But let's say it's your yogurt. 6 weeks before the next sell-by date, we're going to drop the price by 2%. It'll be a little nudge for consumers, and we'll just see, can we move it? And maybe then we'll do 3.7%, and we'll learn the optimal point to just lower prices just enough to drive sales so we don't have waste while retaining margins for those grocery stores so they can still run their businesses, and give consumers what they want, avoid the waste, put that kind of solution in market, right? So now it's not up to the consumer alone to try and cut waste. At the grocery store level, they have a solution. And I'm seeing stuff like that really start to percolate through the economy, these systems. And so some of it's consumers have better choices, and some of it's we're getting far better systems across our economy that also help us reduce our impact, even by default, where we might not have to try as hard.
Yeah. No, and then even then, I appreciate that. That's a very thorough answer, and I guess what I really got from that was the overall opportunities. And you're correct. Like I had another individual the other day mention they used a service on their phone. They're homeless, right? Declared homelessness, and they're looking into these services. And at the same time too, like you said, if food waste was its own country, yeah, that's a whole other country or a whole other conversation in and of itself. But they still use the service, and even on the consumer end, they put it in their cart and it auto checked out and literally auto charged the card. And they didn't even have it. So like even when these systems are there and they are working, we still have what's working and what's not working. If we can't talk about it, then because don't get me wrong, there's other services that I have used. I'm not gonna say any names right now, and I've had stuff in my cart for however long, and I've never gotten charged. So like, what I just want to throw that out there too is as to these systems are there. There's a purpose for them. There's an impact too that they can have too. There can still be what it is that someone may want on specific products, and they can still follow whatever systems they still want for profit around that. And I can also see too the IRS, and again, still do your own research. Again, I went to school for nursing. There's still a use for losses. Losses can still be used to offset costs as well too. People don't like to talk about that, but it's still a conversation I think around this too. That if someone wants to be able to find ways, and not just around specific times of the year, I'd say in each quarter or even say in day to day, moment to moment, if you can, and see the impact too of what that can have too. I want to acknowledge time here as well, and I wanted to see too if you had a quote to close us on this.
A quote to close us on this. Mm-hmm. Well,
or a favorite quote.
A favorite quote. This is going to sound weird, or maybe not. I don't know. But I was listening to. I'm a college football fan, and the Indiana University has just gone on this historic run. They're now the #1 team in the country in college football, which has never happened in the history of Indiana. They have a coach who's only been there for 2 years. And I was actually just listening to a little clip of him this morning talking about his philosophy, like how did he do that? And what he talked about was, so it's football, it's one play at a time, right? But it was this mindset of like, you run a play, you start over. The next play is 6 seconds. You perform your best for 6 seconds. You give it all, and then it's almost like the goldfish mindset, like no memory, right? You start again, and you hold yourself to a standard, and you do that over and over because your habits form who you are, right? And that was really the takeaway for me from what he said. And if you do have the right habits, then that will become who you are, and you will achieve the goals that you have. Right? That is the order of how it works. So that's not a direct quote. I'm paraphrasing.
No,
but
that works. That works.
It just hit me so hard. It's like such a great truth.
Wow. And if you'd like to come back again as a guest on the podcast, we can get you scheduled too if you enjoy your experience this time. And if not, too, how else can people reach you?
Thank you so much. So the best place to find what we do is getsuper.cool. where we have our podcast, our weekly newsletter. We have a course called the Climate Adoption Playbook where we help companies and founders who are trying to put climate solutions into market where they can understand how the best companies in the world are doing and learn from them. So that's really where to find us. And if anyone wants to follow me on social, I tend to be on LinkedIn more than anywhere else, and be happy to connect with whoever finds this, what we're talking about interesting and wants to learn more.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Josh. And again, this has been another successful episode of the Own Your Health Tech podcast.